It's now 18 minutes after 7, time for us to review some of the stories that are making headlines this week. And the panel remains the same. We have David Osiani, we have Joy Brenda Mdivo, Philip Magal, and Mark Bichachi. And we start off with the recent appointments that, of course, caused a lot of uproar. I see there's a story on page 2 of the Standard. Sakaja opposes Wambui's new post. And a court battle is looming between former Othaya Member of Parliament Mary Wambui and Nairobi Senator Johnson Sakaja. Yesterday's Standard captured it, and the title was Kenya as a country for old people. So, of course, let me start, and I would like to believe that I have a fairly young panel here. Your thoughts on, first of all, the Jubilee government coming in. They declared and made a promise that them being a young, team, they were going to ensure that the youth are taken care of. But the appointments are completely far from that. In fact, to use the words of one panelist we had yesterday, she said that it's about time we began to believe Uhuru that he does not trust the youth. Let me start with you, David Osiani. Do you feel that the president does not trust
I think on this panel, I'm the proper youth. Below 35. But I tell you, the appointment of Mary Wambui was in bad taste. Sakaja captures it aptly. He says, Mary Wambui can contribute in other aspects of this country, but appointing her to sit at the helm of National Employment Authority is an insult to the younger people. I wish that they had even found their version of their young selves when they are running for office at 48 and 51. It would make a bit of sense. At 51, someone has had sufficient experience. We have young people who are doing stellar jobs in this country, in the labor world, globally, recognized and appreciated. I have repeated, this is the country that had Mwai Kibaki as a minister for finance at 38, that had Tom Mboya as a minister for justice at 33. This is the country that had Kenneth Njindo Matiba as a PS at 28, had David Musila as a provincial commissioner at 31. This is the country that had Dawson Mwanyumba as Minister for Public Service and what would now be called ICT at 36. This very country had Ochilo Ayako, Minister for Sports at 33, and Amason Kingi at 34 as minister. What became of our young people? And they did not do any massive wrongs, as we know of others who were slightly older, who did tremendously dangerous things. I understand the risk with young people, the get-rich-quick schemes which have come, and I understand. But there has to be what is called, a balance of age. Balance the public service then. I understand there are people who are older, who have had stellar careers in public service. People like Mudhaura are big names globally. We want to learn from them. But if you keep everyone at that level, at that age, then you've honestly been unfair to younger people. Have a balance of the ages, of the young, the middle-aged, and the old. That is how you cascade knowledge downwards.
All right, Joy Brenda, your thoughts on that?
That was the problem when we started defining 51-year-olds as young people.
Yeah.
Because when you look at somebody who's 51 as young, then somebody who's 69 is young-ish. Older. Is youngish. And and I think that's a problem. But for Mary Wambui, my take is slightly different. My take is there is something called elevating somebody to the level of incompetence. You can give somebody a job that so exposes their soft underbelly that it destroys them. It becomes the thing that just does them in. She has a career as a representative of the people. She has demonstrated that she has a heart for public service. That's why she offered herself to serve the people of Othaya and did for the time that they gave her. And she has shown herself to be an astute businesswoman. But for this particular role, you would, even as the Act prescribes, you would think that there would be somebody with an HR background. Does she have that? No, she doesn't. You would think that it would be somebody who also can appreciate the nuances of employment. She's been a businesswoman. Has she had any opportunity to sort of attend job interviews, to do... Is that sort of the background that she has? Probably not. So in putting her in that situation, two things happen. One, it destroys her because, I mean, you're completely inept, you're out of your depth. you have a board that probably knows more than you. They would sabotage you and just make your life a living nightmare for the next 3 years. But on the other hand, you have an institution that suffers a lack of visionary leadership. And what happens in 3 years can be enough to even cause the entire thing to fall through. So in this particular instance, I would that the president would use principles of leadership, put the right people in the right place to do the right job. When you do that, you look good as well. It's the same thing as even the mistake that we saw with the CS reappointing somebody who's since deceased. Sometimes just take the time to dot your I's and cross your T's. The little details. You may have gotten a list, maybe you did not interrogate it, but now that this has come to light, same way you have revoked the appointment of several people of this board and that board, just make a quick switch. You know, even, she doesn't have to be chair, fine, then put her as one of the members if she really must be in that board. But we cannot underscore a very vital fact.
And it's instructive to note it's the pioneer board.
When you see the nation of old people, that the splash that was there is something we youngish, because tukitoa ID yenyewe, we youngish people need to also understand that older people do have something to contribute to this society, and they do have value. So it's not just the fact that age disqualifies you. That's ageism. It's a form of discrimination. If somebody still has value that they are contributing to the society, by all means, we should be humble enough to draw from that. It should be a means of also technology transfer. Let's learn from these people. Let the baton pass on. Let us glean what we can from them. But if somebody's in a place where they don't have anything to pass on, also let us do them let's have the respect to not expose their weakness to everybody to see, because we have even heard Ms. Mary addressing people. It is a place where now she will be the butt of every joke, all the cartoons. I mean, let's just not do this to her.
Yes.
So, you know, I'm not so much about age. I'm about ideas.
Competence.
We have young people with very old ideas, just like we have old people with very nice
very
ideas.
Progressive ideas.
What we are seeing is the effect of what we've been doing as a society. You cannot plant tomatoes and expect to reap onions. The young people of this nation really are the ones with the old ideas, and they're the ones who've gotten themselves to this point. Look at it when we go to vote. On what basis do we vote people?
Tribe.
We vote for them on tribe,
Sadly.
handouts, and such like things. We vote for old people. We vote for old ideas. What then do we expect? Okay? When people go demonstrating that mtu wetu hajapata kazi, or our region has not been factored in, what are we telling the government? If you see what the president is doing, he's actually trying to get the people that have the say in this country close and within his ranks to secure the political support from all corners of this country. It is because that is the way the country is set up.
But Philip, how do we change that paradigm? Because sometimes it seems like a vicious circle, in the sense that those youth you're talking about are probably kept in that state of mind and poverty by virtue of intentionally, because they're going to be used as
It is for them
capital.
to liberate themselves. It's for them to come up with new ideas. Should Oceani offer himself up here for election in Madare, he should be voted irrespective of his tribe. Should Bichachi here want to be ahead of whatever is properly qualified for, he should get it irrespective of his tribe. But look at how Jubilee is set up. I would say that with this without fear of contradiction. At some point, it was only two communities occupying only almost 70% of senior positions in this country. And people didn't complain at that point. They celebrated, and come 2017, that is the reason they voted these people back into office.
Mark, we complain about these things time and again, but when it comes to action, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, come 2022, we just might see a replay of what we have always seen happening. Then we'll sit here and talk about it again and again. Do you think we are at the verge of seeing a change of how we do things in Kenya? And the youth, by the way, just to mention, they're the critical mass, they're majority.
You know, it's interesting how we as a country will sit and complain that she's chair of an agency when we did not complain when she was MP, when we chose her. You see, leadership is something that we must take seriously. The truth of the matter is this. In electing her for office, the people of the Republic of Kenya indicated to the president that this is someone we trust enough to handle a budget of 100 million shillings. This is someone we trust enough to be able to decide, for example, the rate caps for loans in this country. We decided that we trusted her enough to be in the inaugural parliament of the new constitution. And we cannot separate the very real reality that in this country, you want political appointments more than you want competent appointments. There's one time Raphael Tuju said that he is not Luo enough to represent Luos in cabinet. Because at that point, all Luos were saying we are not represented in cabinet. And yet he was in cabinet. There is a serious problem with our country. There is also a problem with how we absorb facts. If you look at the number of so-called old people that have been put in these boards, we did not check and see what is their CV. Let me tell you something. Give me 10 Mudhauras over one Jaguar any day. Any day. And I'll say that without fear of contradiction. It is not true to tell me that when I hit the age of 71, I will have nothing to contribute to this country. Bernie Sanders is 78.
But let me pose you, Mark, and that is true, but are you then alluding or trying to say that we don't have young people that can occupy those offices that are qualified and competent enough?
I am getting there. If you look at the list of those old people, right? Were they more than 100? No. How many parastatals exist in this country?
261.
261. Okay? Assume each has 4 board appointments. The reason why we are talking about this is because we as a people are lazy to check on facts. Let's check the facts. Osiani here is 33. He's a board member tasked with one of the most important roles in the western part of this country.
For a dead organization.
Reviving.
Dead organization.
Reviving.
I wish. I mean, it's
No.
And maybe you're there to give it life.
The point
That is why
is,
we put you there.
it's a setup of the
There's a vampire sucking your life.
let me finish. Joy Mdivo, betting, licensing, and control. She's not an octogenarian. Out of 260 chairmen, how many of them are octogenarians?
And when is it my turn to
when
eat
we
as
say,
You've mentioned all these
the reason why we notice a Mudhaura, why we notice a Mary Wambui, is because of the public space they occupy.
No, but Mark, you must be challenged on that.
Let me finish my statement. There are over. Mary Wambui is a special case, but everyone else who's been appointed, okay? Because now we are accusing the president of appointing old people. But everyone else who's been appointed, Moody Awori, you cannot tell me that Moody, who was vice president but 10 years ago, suddenly lacks the capacity to manage.
No, man, the thing is, it's not that he suddenly lacks. No, it's not that he suddenly lacks the capacity.
The argument is not about merit, yeah? It is about our turn to eat. Basically, what the young people are saying is it's not that we are competent.
But being a
They are
child is about
saying these old men have been eating. These old men have been eating for too long. Mudhaura is too rich. I also need to get rich.
No,
I need an
that is the argument.
Yeah, that is the argument, and that's where we are losing it.
No, but if we argue like that,
when we had young men running for Starehe constituency, and by the way, Starehe is the CBD, isn't it?
Yes.
The center and the heartbeat of this country. We had the option between Jaguar and Boniface Mwangi.
Yes.
What did people go for? And on what basis?
Well, you find a
Okay? Somebody who doesn't know Nairobi is capital city of Nairobi. And that is where we are going wrong. It's not a merit-based argument. Francis Mudhaura has been a public space for a long time, and we know that he's a stellar performer. Why should I complain when he takes up another
But the
role?
thing is...
And that is exactly why he's at the KRA.
Absolutely.
Because he's an old and trusted hand. But why would I be fronting myself?
The truth is, we're not faulting every appointment, and we're not saying that the older people do not have anything that they can give. But there's also the question of when do they hand over? At what point do we have a succession for some of these organizations? Because there are people who are coming up.
You need to also understand.
If you look at KRA board, you want to tell me everyone there is an octogenarian. What do you want to do?
Let me say this.
Various boards have different
let's hear
ages.
from
Let me say this, because Mark, Joy, and I are privileged to sit on boards in this country. But because we are privileged, we also then know how much power the chair of any board wields.
Exactly.
All right? I also know for a fact, at least they sit in boards that are functional. I sit in a board for an organization that is on its knees because the sugar sector is dead, and there has not been any decision to try and get it up, you know? And if that board that I sit on had been entrusted with an organization that is functional, because someone like Buzeki is my chair, I am his de facto vice chair. If the board I sit on had been given a task in an organization that's functioning, it would obviously perform so well. The reason I am talking about generational mix, and I respect the need, it's because I respect the need for having older people pass down the information. But older people can also pass down information when they are not chairs of these boards. When you talk about generational mix, you must demonstrate that the generational mix we're talking about is of absolutely fine hands. Someone like James Rege sits in Ketraco. He's one of the biggest names as an engineer in that sector, reputed for that. And so even when we argue that this is a bit old, we would say comfortably that there are people who would not match up to his level. But when you talk about National Employment Authority, I expected that if you don't want a 35-year-old or a 40-year-old, at the very least, give us Bitang and Demo. Because when you're talking about Employment Authority, and this is not to campaign for him, this is someone who he's a professor of small and middle, income enterprises, where we need to be looking at, because the government cannot absorb every young person. You need someone who will think out of the box, who will say, these are the propositions we are making. But even lesser than Bitang and Demo, there are young people who I would guarantee you at 45, who have done tremendously well. If you ask me, has Mary Wambui employed, how many people does she employ? So that she tells us that, I may not have, formal education advantages, but I have started a company from the bottom up that employs 4,000 people. On that basis, I can guarantee you that I have the template for setting a standard nationwide. So we have to be honest with the president, even as his appointees, and tell him, Mr. President, this cannot go on for too long. I remember almost beginning of this year saying, when we were going to Madaraka Day, that there are names of young people that also deserve to be given head of state commendations for the great job they're doing. All right? I proposed then that we have Eliud Kipchoge. To date, I know he will be feted in Mombasa now because he has done this. But back then, my friend tells me, one time Eliud Kipchoge went to the US Embassy to apply for his visa. A humble person. Word reached Godek that Eliud Kipchoge was there. Godek shut down the embassy for 1 hour and told people services are stopped. Pulled Eliud Kipchoge into the hall and said, come and motivate these people. Someone else appreciated our own son more than we saw his talent and mettle. So when we talk about state appointments, out of 261 states, parastatals, more than half of them do not have substantive boards at the moment, all right? Those that have, a big chunk of them has been a regeneration. Now, when you talk about people like Professor, what's his name here? Losenge Turop, who has studied, plant anatomy and stuff like that. Why do you take him to Uwezo Fund? Prior to that, he was the chair of the National Environmental Trust Fund, Net Fund, where I think he fits. Why do you then move him to Uwezo Fund when you have young people between 40 to 50 years, between 30 to 45 years, who can properly contribute in ensuring that Uwezo Fund is what it ought to be?
All right, let's discuss.
Let's agree on this.
Let's look at how do we as a country put up a system where we pass down the baton, because that doesn't seem to happen. Whether you look at our political parties, whether you look at this board appointments, we seem to have individuals that do a stellar job, and we can quote many, but there seems to be no way of handing this down to the younger generation. Have the younger generation stepped up? Is it that they have not been there, or have they not been given the opportunity?
No, is there a framework that allows them to sit on the decision-making?
Let's start here. Let's start here. One of the things that Africa and Kenya specifically needs to work on as a matter of urgency is, do we have generational thinking? Exactly. And the truth is, we don't. If you look at our plans, our plan to this day, it's almost 2020. Our plan ends at 2030. It's as though 2030 and one does not exist. If you look at even our political space at the national level,
2022.
You cannot imagine as though 2022, when it comes, we'll have a September. It's as if 2022 begins and ends at August. Absolutely. And there's a lot of non-generational thinking across the board. You just wait for a rich Kenyan to die. Then we will spend 16 years in court trying to figure out a very lucrative business that was employing Kenyans and working properly. How is it going to continue? This problem is not just a political problem. Our society as Kenya does not plan for the future. If the people who are watching at home would tell me what is their plan for their family at 2050, right? Most people don't, and that's where the problem is. So look at our political parties. If you look at DP as a party, which was once one of the strongest parties in this country, look at the people who are running it. It's the same people whose career died 12 years ago. And if their career died 12 years ago, how do you expect that they should resuscitate it now? And the injection of fresh blood has to be a conscious effort. It cannot be a passive effort. This idea that youth are supposed to just burst onto the scene cannot work. No, the reason why Jaguar thinks that government should still employ people is because the guy has never been mentored. He's never been taught. So he doesn't know. So the problem of people who just grow into leadership, like Babu Owino as an example, if you listen to his tongue, you will realize it's not the tongue of the learned, and not in terms of school. It is learned in terms of how do you interact with people. It's not mentored.
We have a fundamental problem as well. Culture has changed. We are not what we used to be.
True.
Once upon a time, people had what I like calling stickability. You had somebody who entered in the Ministry of Finance as an accounts clerk and just kept slogging and growing into it until by the time he is in his 40s, in 42, he's at least at a place where if you give him a certain office, he has sort of grown into it. Our young people, if somebody stays in a job for 4 years, you lack ambition. That's the definition of lacking ambition. They don't see it as creating a track record, as building a career.
Portfolio.
We have come at a place where we despise run-of-the-mill sort of jobs. And with government, unfortunately, everything is run off the mill. It's procedures, it's directions. So if you haven't been in a place long enough to establish a reputation in that area, then nobody is going to come to look for you in the cyber cafe where you are doing really cool graphics and give you an opportunity. There's some of these jobs where it's only the old-fashioned way that will work. The young people have to take an interest and pay the price of waiting for it. I look at it even when we're looking at, when you talk about a political office, that's why sometimes the young people feel entitled to, you must create this room for us. And the women, we set the pace for that by saying, you must create room for us. Some of these things in life, it takes you paying the price, just creating the track record to prove yourself such that the baton then is available to be passed on to you. A guy won't run around the track, then get to near the finishing line, then start looking at the stands. Who's ready to receive this baton? No, you must be on the track, running after that guy, ready to receive, having trained with him. So our young people also have
I want us to conclude on that. I'll give you a chance,
the young
Philip.
people can learn from the old generation. The old generation owns this country for a reason. Look at Tom Mboya. Look at Matiba, look at Njonjo. What is the difference between, and there's a very big difference between that generation and this generation. Those people had new ideas. Those people had vibrant and positive ideas. But since our independence, we've gone back so much, we cannot even recognize ourselves in the mirror. The young people have an opportunity to dictate the course this country takes. And it can either be positive or negative. It is up to them. It is in their hands.
The question that still remains is, what is that bottleneck? Because we do have young people with ideas. We do have people with brilliant minds, but there seems to be something that chokes those ideas that they never come to the surface.
This is why I speak about leadership. You know, the crowd mentality may not give us the best we want. And yes, it is right, we will accuse young people as the biggest voters of always doing the wrong things and voting in all the wrong people, but leadership doesn't end there. Fine, you've been put in office. Become a leader. You must rise and create structures and frameworks that help you identify brilliant young minds. You must look down and say, these old people, I won't let them go. You know, at 70, you still have a proper presence of mind. In the United States Supreme Court, the judges sit until they are 100, all right? Because they believe even at 100, if you take it, you have a proper sense of mind. But then, don't make it look like there is no hope for people who are not close to, you know, proximity to power. You must be able to demonstrate, when you say that I am making 40 appointments, that I will go for 10 people who have had several years in public service because they have a duty. You can't go and run Central Bank of Kenya at 35 and tell me that, you know, you have understood it. I would understand if you gave someone a little older because of interest and track record. At 35, someone hasn't built sufficient track record to be put in charge of the central bank or the Kenya Revenue Authority. But at 45, if he has worked in the government for 10 years, he has built sufficient track record. At 65, heck, even 70, it's okay. But there are institutions where you would entrust younger people. People, if you think that 35 or 25 is too young, then 40 should be sufficient. Generational mix. So leadership calls on the leader to put a framework. He has all these NIS right from the top to the bottom. They know people right in the villages. He has the MPs if he wants to rely on them. He has the provincial administration if he were to rely on them. And say, can I get on my desk 100 young people, 3 from every county, who you think are doing a brilliant job?
Good job.
He will get them.
All right, and I want us to move on from that because that was one of the things that took place this week. But the other was the launching of the SGR. Some, including Standard, called it SGR to nowhere, which the president contested and said, no, it's not to nowhere.
It's to Naivasha.
It's to Naivasha. But terminating at Suswa, yes.
On that one, I think we need to put the whole of this into perspective. When it comes to major infrastructural investments, not all would be profitable. And that is where the government has to step in and invest. Let's take an example. We have the G4S. It's a securities firm, and it is there for profit. We also have the Kenya Police. If we are to compare these two, we would be comparing an orange and a mango just because both are round. Okay? When I was a small child, we had these lines, telecom lines, deep in West Pokot. I can tell you not more than 3 families had telephones in their houses. What was it for? The government sometimes had to step in and invest where private investors wouldn't go.
Would not go.
But all the same, not to exonerate the government from the fact that there were inflated costs and there might have been elements of corruption which have made this project. So
are you saying that SGR is one of those that maybe as Kenyans we should just accept that maybe it will not be profitable?
Yes, not at least not soon. That one I can assure you, not soon. But the fact that I can be able to get into a train in Syokimau and be in Mombasa in 4 hours, for me that is a plus for me as an individual. And I should take advantage of that. The fact that I have a power line in my grandmother's home, which I never thought would have power line, should be an opportunity for me. It is for me to take that opportunity up and make something of it. I can now put up a posho mill there and, now that Bichachi likes ugali, I should be able to sell it to him. People are saying Suswa is in the world, but for a right-thinking Kenyan, that is now the place to invest. That is the place to buy land and to live, especially if you want to be commuting to Nairobi every day.
You know, I asked this question before, I'll ask it again. What profit does the road to your house, dear Kenyan, make this country? Are you a factory? Are you a factor of production? Your kids, when they're riding their bicycles on that stretch of road, are they producing for this economy?
They're becoming healthy for the economy.
We need to understand one thing, that the government's responsibility is also to ease and to make comfortable the life of Kenyans. So does SGR meet that requirement? Yes, it does. Does it reduce the number of accidents on the road? Yes, it does. How many accidents has SGR had versus how many accidents on the Nairobi-Mombasa highway? As in, let's be reasonable. How many of us, when we are driving to Naivasha, like weaving between those endless tracks? As in, come on. Number two, what is the horticultural center of this country? It's Naivasha, isn't it? How many flowers? And I was on a flower farm the other day. Let me tell you, they told us there's a road in Naivasha South Road that had potholes.
It has.
Yes,
potholes.
it's being fixed now. And now what happened is there was a strike by matatus for 2 days. And we went to this flower farm and they said because of the road closure, they lost 20 million shillings in 2 days. On top of that, they said that their maintenance costs per month passing that road were 2-3 million shillings. Now, you tell me, when the government is bringing the SGR that close to them and reducing the transport time, the logistics time, the cost for this thing, this factory that now employs 4,000 Kenyans, how many more will be employed? Now, when you're counting profit and loss for SGR, will you count the profit for this factory? No, you won't. Will you also count the number of people who are going to invest in the EPZ that is being created in Suswa? And number two, which mad world do you want where the government does not think on how to develop Suswa? When you think when the British came, Nairobi was a city. What the heck is wrong with Kenyans? Let's do the math. Every major city that has developed in this country has developed along the train. It has developed along the train.
He has a habit of doing
Before Mark insults all the Kenyans.
No, because I get very... Listen,
Shika kopo la maji. Shika kopo la maji.
if they want SGR to be profitable, the government is not a business.
Let's hear from
It's
Joy.
you
Let's hear
who
from
put your
Joy.
cargo there.
That is true. And there is a point that the president made that I think we need to latch on. He said, you are seeing now we have a vision. And when somebody has a vision, what they're telling you is that they have the big picture in mind. When the people were laying the Lunatic Express, the fast railway, and they had people back in India, heard how their brothers were being eaten by lions, I'm sure they asked the same questions. You mean they took our brothers all the way to Africa
Just
to go
to be
and
eaten.
become meat for lions? But that Lunatic Express served us for how many years later? Sometimes
And how many years Kenyans were crying for it to come back?
We have to absorb.
Yes.
There are times we have to absorb the punch for future generations. We're the ones who are here now. We're the ones who will see the hula baloo and the shenanigans of it. But when our children's children finally get rid of this second-hand train and get a really nice train that's running on the same tracks, and when now people can live in Kitale and work in Nakuru, because the commute is possible, then is when we'll start seeing the value of this. When I'm looking forward to other tributaries off the main line to other parts of this nation, so that we don't just have that straight line from the coast to Malaba, but you give an opportunity to other areas. That will be vision. What I would put a red flag on is what we have seen from Mombasa to where we are currently. The costs are ridiculously high. One of the high costs is the cost of reimbursing people because of land. There's been a lot of fraud, a lot of madogodanyo around it. There's also been talk of inflating other costs, of sourcing materials that at a cost that is such that the line costs more than it should. If the government can also hear the part of Kenyans that says, look, it might be a good idea, but part of the reason why even the Chinese are a bit antsy about getting it to Kisumu is because even they are not seeing how this thing is going to get paid out. It's costing way too much. Maybe we start thinking about even ourselves as a nation. Can we batten down on some areas and invest in some things ourselves? Because everything can't always be alone. We have to get to a place where also the places where we are putting these stations, one of the biggest ridiculousness is trying to even access the stations themselves. The infrastructure on the ground to get to Rongai station or to get to Syokimau like now, if I want to go to Mombasa, I have to get to Syokimau. By the time I get from Rongai to Syokimau, is sometimes almost 2 hours.
Almost the same time as going to Mombasa.
So I'd rather get to Wilson and fly to Mombasa.
Remember, there's somebody living in Rongai.
All right, David
I'm
Osiani.
living in
And of
Rongai.
course, one of the things that Kenyans are largely concerned about is what Joy has finished with, the cost. Because it is a good idea. I think that is not in contention. It is going to be profitable to Kenyans, whether it is by private business or just by leisure with time. But the cost of SGR for us is the pain that we feel, because this is going to cost us for a long time.
I will not underscore even more that government is not in the business of doing business.
Exactly.
Government is in the business of improving the living standards of its people.
Yes.
Government is in the business of ensuring that life is bearable. That said, when government has to borrow to make us comfortable, then there must be fiscal discipline with the resources at hand. This is money we borrowed. We borrowed, then there has been proof that it was just wasted. Swazuri and company went and paid everyone an inflated cost and took kickbacks. The cost of doing that railway line, the standard gauge railway, ended up being 3 times an equivalent in Ethiopia, which is electric. So we have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, yeah, we are not up to doing business. It's not going to be profitable. Let me make that clear for you. Transport for London is not profitable. From the buses to the underground subways, everything there. But what does it do? The convenience it causes has greatly improved the economy of London, of the country. So we must be able to then devise a way in which the railway line can, one, improve our economy so much so that we are able to pay it off quickly, and then look at what other value it adds to the economy greatly than just making profit as the Kenya Railway Company. So the railway line, right now it's a beginning, and people may fault it. That the price was inflated has to be said and put clear here. But to also put expectations of profitability now is a joke.
It's a joke. It's not feasible.
It's unreasonable.
Yeah.
It is a joke. We also have to put that and lay it down here. But then the president has tasked people like Hinga, brilliant people. I don't know why they're not doing those brilliant things here, to ensure that it can be explained to Kenyans what economic value is in the railway line. It's just like building your house. You know, when you're building a 7-bedroom mansion, when you have just done the first level of, when you've just done the basement floor in the underground, no one sees what's going on
at the top,
on the ground level. They'll say, "Sasa hii ni nini? What did he do it for?"
A bunker.
It may take 5 years.
You just need nowhere.
It may take 5 years and say a floor going nowhere. Eventually it will make sense. So what ought to happen? And that's why I fault the communication team. You should be able to communicate to Kenyans. Where are you going?
Paint a picture.
Where is the drawing, the
Give us the
architectural
vision
drawing, the vision of what this is intended to do? And say,
And
20
that's
years
not the
from
president's
now,
job.
this is when Raila was breaking homes around what is now called the bypass. He was told, Jaruo anaagucha manyumba kwa sababu hawana manyumba. All right? Who are the greatest, the people who profit the most from those bypasses? The same people who said Jaruo amekuja kuagucha manyumba. So let us agree. It may not look rosy now. It will be appreciated in the future.
So communication from the side of government need to step up. We
Hasn't
need to
been
wind up
early.
soon. But you've brought in something, and let us also not forget that the debt ceiling was raised or proposed by members of parliament, and we're talking about waste here. And unfortunately for Kenyans, whereas the debt ceiling being raised may not be a bad thing on its own, it's the waste that comes with it that worries us as Kenyans, because then what does that mean for our future? If it was being put to good use, if this infrastructure was costing the right amount and was done properly, then of course we can see the benefits.
There are two things that we need to address post-haste as a country. Number one, we need to address the acquisition of land by government institutions. Whatever NLC did in the last term of the NLC commissioners was not only criminal, it was immoral. Okay? They basically lifted up Kenya's skirt and just embarrassed us everywhere. And that cannot be allowed to continue. And that said, we need to understand one thing, that we have done wasteful things in civil service in this country for far too long. But if you go to any government institution, the people who procure flowers, the people who procure curtains, the people who procure cartridges are focused on making money for themselves. They are focused on cutting deals. And let me tell you, I have seen the measures on the macro measures that are there to save money. But I will tell you for free, and this is advice probably to my government, the money is lost in the details. We must begin to look at the details of how government institutions are spending money. Because the problem is not just corruption. Because the president said something that if you didn't listen carefully, you missed it. He said, corruption is institutionalized in this country. A lot of the time, the things that people do that are wrong have backup. When Osiani says that, oh, we procured the highest cost of cement, you will find that indeed all the people who tendered, instead of saying that cement is 600 shillings a bag, all of them who tendered were at 2,000, 3,000, and the list was at 2,000. That is the problem. That the kind of people that we have as Kenyans will not bat an eyelid at the opportunity to steal from this country. And if we do not catch the devil in the details, then we will be fighting at the top, and we will never save money.
We need to have our closing remarks. I'll start with you, Philip. We need to wind up.
Just to add on to what my colleague has been saying, you know, I'm one of those positive Kenyans, not the kind that has a problem for every solution. And I'm a big supporter of the president because I want this country to work. But sometimes he has a tendency to shoot himself on the foot. He's cut the judiciary's budget, yet he expects 50%. The judiciary to deliver on the fight against corruption. I mean, how does he expect the judiciary to deliver? We've had some very nice arguments on the SGR by my colleagues as well. I want to extend this argument to the affordable housing. I really want a house in this city. And as it is, I can tell you for a fact, unless I get a turn to eat in one of these boards, I won't get that. I won't get a house. The president is watching, I'm sure he has heard this. Yes, I won't get a house. So we need those cases in courts finalized or thrown out. We need the president to get down with this. At the end of the next 3 years, if these houses are not constructed, it is not the judiciary that will go back to the ballot. It is the president, and he will be judged on that.
Harshly. Yes. Joy Brenda, your closing remarks?
In fact, I like where my learned colleague has gone. With the cutting of the budget of the judiciary, there is the jeopardizing of the fight against corruption, but also there's an issue of access to justice. One of the things that makes the cost of doing business go high is the fact that disputes in this country, getting disputes resolved, is incredibly difficult. And I would that the president would reconsider that decision. And at least there are things that you can do away with, maybe trainings and seminars and stuff, but for operations in the law courts, cutting everything by 50% is not sustainable. But that said, one thing that has come across in all these things that we have discussed this morning is that corruption is such a big deal that you find the president now thinking, maybe I should stick with the lieutenants that I know, because young people can no longer be trusted. I don't know what brand of madness they're going to bring. These ones, I know they're a brand of crazy, but I don't know what brand of crazy the young people are coming with. We need to come to a place as a country where we understand that what we are doing for our country is not just for our benefit, but our children's children. But one other thing that has come across, and which is what Philip is alluding to, when we look at leadership as an investment, and so we even spend money to access leadership, then we lose sight of why people need leaders. People need leaders to get them to a certain place, to get some aspirations. And in this country, we have leaders who are investors, who are getting there to get tenders, who are getting there to line their own pockets and build their own personal empires, not build legacy, to build their empires. And I think I would urge the president, what he has done with the ferry board Can we start seeing a little bit more of the same? Because when you do that, then people take it seriously that you want to fight corruption, you want to deliver on your legacy. But if you seem reluctant and it's your legacy and it's your fight against corruption, then the rest of us, we are wondering who we are taking cues from. So, Mr. President, step it up.
All right, David, your closing remarks.
Well, the Big Four agenda was a brilliant concept, still is. But the president needs to know that it will move as fast as he moves. He has entrusted people, different people, to do the jobs. Some are not. One person in the health sector has decided that 800 quack facilities cannot operate. Kudos. It's part of the bigger plan. When you talk about manufacturing, and then you give us Mary Wambui, it does not match with your desire. Because manufacturing is intended to create jobs for young people by ensuring that younger businesses grow. And that is a source of employment. Therefore, if you choose the chair of a National Employment Authority or its board or any of the other boards that augment that pillar of the Big Four, they must speak to your vision for that pillar. And when you get to housing, which has been stopped by the courts, I hope that they're able to get that barricade so that we move on. And of course, agriculture, which is my heartbeat, where we see billions lost every year. Take time. Sit down with the budgets of this country in those 4 major sectors, like Obama did. When Obama became president, he sat down and went for 1 week, budget line by budget line, and ruled out this was nonsense, this is not needful, this is useless. Discipline. Sit down and do the same if need be. I know you have tasked people to do it, but sit down and let Kenyans know that you are in a working session. And to Kenyans, you are as good, your leaders are as good as you. So you don't start pointing fingers, because they are a reflection in the mirror of your very selves. If we held ourselves to a higher standard, we would get more and better, and we would have the impetus then to hold to account these other people. The people of Othaya should shut up in this National Employment Authority engagement, because they elected someone to go and legislate a more honorable task than being the chair of a board. And so all Kenyans must hold to account themselves before they talk about the leaders.
Final words, Mark.
You know, housing has been mentioned a lot of times, and I've just gone to PS Charles Hinga's WhatsApp, and not WhatsApp, his Twitter. And here on Park Road is a beautiful, beautiful apartment that has been built using innovation. Innovation in the sense that even when the court stopped the taxation, the PS found a way to deliver for Kenyans. Now here's my problem, that Kenyans do not know how to celebrate success. They do not know how to celebrate a thing that has cost billions of shillings, and so far, 2 years down the line, not a mention of corruption, not a mention of inflated prices, delivered on budget. They promised that it will be here in October of 2019. It is here, but we don't talk about it.
You should see the ones in Gara.
Yes,
you should see the ones
they're
in
brilliant.
Gara.
But here's the problem with this country. The problem with this country is we want to complain, and we have, and I like what he said, that we have problems for every solution. And here's the other problem, that we want a country that fights corruption. And yet the typical Kenyan is a corruption opportunist. He is a corrupt person waiting for opportunity. Let me tell you, I am getting tired of this thing that the government must change. Kenyans must change. The way we consume news must change. We must become the kind of people that when Kipchoge said he's going to do 159, where was public participation? Where was tribal balance?
The face of
we
Kenya.
must understand that the right thing does not need to be done by a Luya or a Kamba or a Kisii. It can be done by anybody. And this idea that Kenyans must complain about everything and never just stop to look and realize that SGR, for example, is a gift horse. If you spend a lot of time looking at the mouth, it will probably be the ugliest thing you've ever seen. But if you spend time realizing that now you can travel better, your business can do better, perhaps you'll see the gift.
Thank you very much. I think that's the right place to wind it up. Mark Bichachi, Philip Magal, Joy Brenda Mdivo, and David Osiani. Thank you for joining us this week. Just to review some of the headlines this